Greetings, founders. Welcome to Feel the Boot, the science of startups. Today I want to talk about a problem that vexes many founders, and that is setting priorities for your development. Whether you're going to be working on some new piece of software that's customer-facing or internal, which of these projects do you want to pursue first? And often there's a lot of people throwing their opinions into the arena and trying to push for their own agendas. This really became clear as an issue to me after mentoring a couple of founders just recently, both of whom were being pressured to prioritize certain development projects, and I think they were not really comfortable doing so. But in one case, their CTO was pushing it. In another, a potential investor was pushing them in this direction. And when I talked to them, we discussed the pros and cons of why to do this and what other priorities they had on deck. And I was very clear in my advice that they should not be working on these projects. So today, I want to take a look at how should you be thinking about which things to prioritize and which things to say no to in a startup environment where all of your resources are so extremely constrained. Hi, I'm Lance Cottrell, and I'm here to help founders on their journey. And I know how difficult that journey can be because I've been there. I ran my own startup, and I've been on the other side of the table as an angel investor and advisor to numerous companies. And I want to help you avoid many of the mistakes that I made. I also want to help provide you with some of the information that you need to know as a founder. My experience of starting a company was that it was an absolutely vertical learning curve. You needed to know so many things on so many topics that really nothing before had ever prepared you for. And that's a huge challenge. And with Feel the Boot, I'm trying to help provide you with a lot of that information, the things that you need to make sound decisions, set good strategy, and ensure the success of your startup. Now, I call this the science of startups because I used to be a scientist. At one time, I was an astrophysicist, and that background informs everything that I talk about and how I approach the startup process. Rather than giving you recipes and formulas to follow, I think it's critical that you actually understand why you're doing the things you're doing and making the decisions you're making, because that's far more robust in situations where perhaps the reality doesn't match up with the assumptions of the rules you were given. You will know how to make the right decisions no matter what the conditions. The situation for both of these founders was pretty similar in that the technology that they were being pushed to build was in fact core to their business. It was an integral part of the logic loop that their customers were going to go through on a continuing basis. But they were currently licensing this software from third parties, and they had multiple choices of who to license it from. This was not some really rare piece of technology that they had to develop. It was fairly commodity. Now, in one case, the CTO was pushing them to develop this software. And that's a really difficult situation, particularly for a non-technical CEO, because you've hired this person or brought them in as a co-founder for their technical experience. And they're saying, hey, I think we should take the company in this technical direction. I think we should build this particular tool. And that put them in an awkward place. Now, I think often CTOs want to build these things because that's their strong point. They like to do development. They like to do coding. And in many startups, there's not that much need for doing a lot of heavy coding. Most of the things are going to be licensed. You're going to be plugging together existing tools and building user interfaces and things like that, which are not that exciting or fulfilling to the developers. And so their instinct is to want to build things. Also, my experience of working with developers and doing a little bit of development myself is that we always think that the previous guy who worked on some code was an idiot, right? We assume that we look at it and we're like, this is terrible. Why did this guy make these decisions? I could do a better job than that. And so you want to go redevelop it yourself. It's really common instinct, but it's not very efficient, especially when the tool is working and frankly working well enough, which was the situation for both these founders. Now, the other founder was being pressured by a potential investor, and they were pushing the company to develop this software because they thought it was important that they have an intellectual property portfolio, that they build some software out that the company owned that they could point to and say, yeah, we built this thing, we built infrastructure, and that would help also bolster the case that they were a tech company as opposed to maybe being categorized in some other way that would bring lower multiples. Now, in both cases, my advice came down to looking at this not from a technical perspective, but from a business perspective, and saying which of the things that you could spend resources on are going to give maximum impact to the business and move things forward. In this case, both of the companies were able to function perfectly well with the existing licensed software. It was good enough, which is good enough, right? They didn't need to implement something new. It's not that the customers were complaining because of the lack of some functionality, or things were breaking, or they were having huge amounts of churn because people were unhappy with the experience that they were having. It was just not exactly what some other people would want to have. And so from a business point of view, it doesn't make any sense to reinvent the wheel at this point, because if you were to re-implement it, it was good enough. It's not going to meaningfully change the user experience. And unless you're hugely changing the user experience, it's really not worth doing things, especially early on. There's so much low-hanging fruit you can just go up and pluck that probably is going to make a 10x difference to your customer's experience and retention and churn and perception of value and everything else. So you want to be going after those early on, not some 5% advantage from re-implementing it yourself. And if you implement this yourself, now you have a whole new code base that you own, that you have to maintain on an ongoing basis. And that's terrible, right? You don't have time to have extra things that are weighing you down, especially if they're not adding value. So it's going to be a millstone. Absolutely not the way to go. And from the idea of it adding value to the company, I really question that. I mean, you talk to 1,000 investors, you're going to get 1,000 opinions. But to me, just because you implemented this doesn't mean it adds value if it's not a differentiator, if it doesn't give you some defensibility. So if you were able to build something that's amazing and really stood out, well then that would be a differentiator. If you've got patents, right, that's a differentiator. But just having a tool that you could buy and that a dozen other people make just as well, realistically, probably better because that's their business, then it's not going to help your company one bit. And you now have additional things that you need to maintain, which is drawing resources away from the other things that you want to do. So being a core part of a business isn't a good enough reason to go develop that particular thing. There are lots of things that are core which are completely generic. So for example, if you're building some marketplace, what's unique about you is the kind of marketplace you're building, the insight that you have into the two sides, the customers and the providers, and how you're going to find them and why this is going to deliver value to each other. But it probably isn't the underlying platform that allows you to have lists of vendors, lists of buyers, and match them up and show the things that they're providing, whether products or services, right? That is really a very common need. Lots of people build them. Unless you're doing something that's radically different in the user experience and the functioning of that marketplace, there's no point in building it yourself. Similarly, if you're building some financial application, you're some sort of fintech play, there's no reason for you to be implementing your own payment processing, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel on credit card processing. That is a generic. You can just plug that in. Lots of people do that really, really well and have fantastic APIs. Go get one of those, plug it in, and focus on the thing that you do. All right, so that was a lot about what you should avoid doing, the things that you should deprioritize. So before I get to talking to the things that you should prioritize, what goes on the do list instead, I want to ask you for a quick favor. If you're still listening to this, and obviously if you're hearing my voice you are, I'm assuming you're getting some value out of this episode. So I'd like to ask you for a favor. Please like this episode. If you're listening to it as a podcast, like it on the podcast platform. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the YouTube video. It makes a huge difference because it tells the algorithm that people like you like this content. And I'm trying to reach people like you, other entrepreneurs, other founders. That's the whole reason I'm doing this project. And so by giving it a like, this video will appear to more people. I'll be able to help more founders, and it's all good. Now, If you've watched tons of these episodes, I'd like to ask you to go just maybe one step farther and subscribe, ring the bell, maybe comment on the episode. Let me know what you think. Give me some feedback, suggestions for additional content that I could be developing, or share it on social media. Let other people in your circle, other founders that you know about this information so that it can help them as well. Again, I would really appreciate it. Thanks. All right, so what should you be building if you're not supposed to be building these things that are core to your business but are kind of generic or anything that's secondary? The things you should be building are the things that you can't get any other way. So if there's something you need to run your business the way you need to run it that is either not in existence, right? No one has ever built this capability before, or no one will sell it to you. They're all proprietary and used internally and you can't license it. Or it is for sale, but the pricing model is such that it literally makes your business model impossible. All the unit economics fail if you license that, right? So again, all these are three ways of saying you can't get the thing you need for whatever reason, and you need it. This can't be something that would be a little nicer for your customers, but you absolutely have to have this to deliver the product and solution that is the value driver for your customers. Then that's the thing you should be building. The next set of things would be things that are going to, again, add huge value. It might not be the core of your business, but if this existed, it would help a lot. People would enjoy it much more. It makes you much more viral. It makes the onboarding process so much easier. It helps people interact with you more often, buy more stuff, whatever that may be. If you can't get it anywhere else and it adds big value, it's one of those 10x things, not a 10% things, then sure, go ahead and build that. But do look hard. Think about, are there other ways you could kludge it together? Especially early on, I have no problem with duct tape and baling wire and manual processes and having some intern hand enter the 50 transactions that you're going to do that day or that week, right? That's totally doable. But if it has to be done, then go do it. That should make it really clear. Just get brutal about it. Ask yourself that hard question. Is this a must-do? And this really comes into the same general advice that comes up over and over on this channel, is that you should only be doing the things that you absolutely have to do. And as I talked about in a previous episode, only when you absolutely have to do it. Don't build it because you think over the next hill, beyond the horizon, there's going to be a need to automate this thing or build out this new process. And so, we might as well build it now. I recommend against doing that because you don't know what's over that next hill. You may have a big pivot over that next hill, or discover that your customers actually are demanding some other sets of capabilities, or there's something else that you could be putting your development resources again that would have this kind of return, not this kind of return. So only things you absolutely need when you absolutely need them. And always with a preference for customer benefit. What will make your customers joyful at interacting with you and your solution? Thanks for watching this episode of Feel the Boot. I hope you found it useful and interesting. If you need some boot personally, I encourage you to go over to feeltheboot.com and join us. I post office hours where you can get one-on-one advising for free from me on a regular basis. And I can help you out with strategy, going to market, product decisions, prioritization, fundraising, pitch decks, whatever you need. I'm happy to talk with you. I actually love working with founders. You guys are the coolest people in the world because you're excited, you've got passion, you're working hard, doing interesting things. And that's just the most fun people to talk to. So I hope you will join. Love to see you in office hours. I also encourage you to join some other people who are followers of the boot, if that's how we want to call it.
Take the shoes and follow him!
Over at the Feel the Boot Founders Alliance. It's a Facebook group. I'll put a link down in the description, and there you'll find some other people who can also sort of bounce ideas off and help you out. Till next time, ciao.